What is this I hear? Is it perhaps a new Doors entity related to the Grumble species? Oh boy, one of my favorites. Well, actually, this entity isn't new, as it technically isn't even a real entity in the game. Sort of. Hello everyone, and welcome to another video about the Grumbles and their lore. Now, if you've seen my previous videos about these entities, it's likely you know what their life cycle is. Essentially, each Grumble starts out as a Giggle, which is like their equivalent to being a baby. Afterwards, they grow into an uninfected Screech. You see, given how Screeches have a few different characteristics than Giggles, which I'll touch up on a little later, we know that they are a little older than normal Giggles. However, given how all Screeches are infected by Seek's slime, we don't know what the uninfected version of the entity looks like, but it still exists as a part of the Grumble life cycle. Anyways, after being an uninfected Screech, the entity will mature into a Grumble, which is the final stage of development for most members of the species. However, if a Grumble is strong enough, they'll take on the role as the Queen, who's larger and stronger than their normal counterparts. Now, in case you didn't notice, the jump from an uninfected Screech to a Grumble is absolutely massive. Obviously, the Grumble doesn't grow over 5 times its size overnight, but unfortunately, there aren't any discernible stages of development in between an uninfected Screech and a Grumble. Or are there? You see, I've created a supposed stage of growth in this humongous gap that occurs before the Grumble stage, and in this video I'll be explaining it to all of you. Think of this video as one showcasing an entity concept or suggestion. However, instead of it being completely made up by an insane person, it is actually rooted in facts about the game's lore, and it is created by a slightly more insane person. We'll be going over what this supposed new entity's name, design, and mechanics could possibly be. So, with all of that being said, let's begin. Alright, so this is what I call a growl. As is implied, this stage of development takes place in between an uninfected Screech and a Grumble in that massive age gap, and this image showcases its size compared to some other stages of development. Now, as you may have known, as a Giggle develops, their physical characteristics grow. More obviously, their size drastically increases, but other body parts do as well. For example, given how Giggles have 4 tentacles, Screeches have 6, and Grumbles have 8, it is implied that as the entity ages, they grow more tentacles. This same logic also applies to the entity's eyes as well as their teeth, where the number of them increases as their age does. I utilized this logic to create the growl. Given its placement in the Giggle life cycle, it has 7 tentacles, as well as a more Screech-like mouth containing more teeth than a Giggle but less than a Grumble. It also has 8 eyes rather than 11 like a Grumble has. With these features taken into consideration, I believe that this is one of the most accurate depictions of how this version of the Grumble life cycle may look like. Now, although that is all fine and dandy, something you may have noticed are the placement of the 4 bottom tentacles on the growl. Now, as you may have known, Giggles are too small to walk, so they latch onto ceilings, and Grumbles are too big to walk, so they crawl on the ground. The growl, however, is just big enough and has enough tentacles to walk around like a cow or a dog. This actually plays into the functionality I've proposed for the creature. You see, I believe that the growl, or whatever this stage of development for a Grumble is called, would actually just freely wander around certain rooms, as they can fit comfortably in them. This would give them a sense of mobility which isn't seen with Giggles or Grumbles, as they could just run after you if you are spotted. So, with this in mind, here's the proposed function I have for this entity. Essentially, whenever they spawn into a room and spot a player, they would let out a large growl, hence their name. Then, they would use their 4 legs to dash towards the player, attempting to trample them, resulting in them dealing some amount of damage. They would continue to chase the player until they leave the room. However, given how I see this creature only moving in quick dashes, turning around or making sharp turns would be difficult for it to accomplish. Now, the only ways which you could avoid a growl is simply by moving away from its trajectory, as that way it won't trample you when it dashes, or by crucifying it, like with all entities. Now, obviously, I know the developers can't really add fan-made entities in the game due to copyright concerns, but that wasn't really the goal of this video. However, this video was meant to highlight what a supposed Grumble stage would look like, as well as what its functionality could be given its circumstances. So although the growl is based on true points in the game as well as a little of my own ideas, it itself will likely never be added. Although, maybe there is hope for an entity like the Growl to be added to the game. After all, we are getting a new subfloor soon, and Floor 3 is going to come out later, so it's possible that the stage of development between an uninfected Screech and a Grumble would be added to the game in one of those floors. After all, in the hotel we just had a Screech, but in Floor 2 we received 2 other members of its species, those being a Giggle and a Grumble, so why can't another be implemented into a future floor? I mean, this is all wishful thinking and speculation, but it definitely is possible. So, to summarize, the Growl is a proposed variation of the Giggle species which takes place in the gap between an uninfected Screech and a Grumble in the life cycle. I've made several of its features reflect on its placement in the life cycle, such as how it has 7 tentacles and 8 eyes. As for functionality, I propose to dash at players whilst running on 4 of its tentacles, given how it appears to be the perfect size to fit into most standard rooms. So with all of that being said, let me know in the comments what you think should be a part of this entity in this stage of the Grumble life cycle. And thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoy.